What's going on, guys, and welcome to today's video. We've got a special episode where we're going to be talking about the Raptors off-season, my grade for what they're going to get for what they've done this off-season, some of the pros and cons of what they've done, things they could have done better, and then talk about their projected lineup. But if you want to hear more about recent news, the Scotty Barnes free agency, all that stuff, make sure to check out our podcast, the Raptors Community Podcast, and we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and you'll be able to get all that content in a longer form, maybe if you're driving home or whatever. But today's episode is going to be quick. We're just going to be giving a quick off-season grade for everything that happened. And a lot of fans don't seem to be really happy with the Raptors off-season. Maybe things have changed over the last little while with resigning Ken Burch, getting assets back for Lowry. I've heard mixed results from a lot of different fans with people thinking, hey, there's still a move to be made. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. We don't really know what's going on in Masai Ujiri's head right now. All we do know is that he got the bag. The Raptors re-signed him for a multi-year deal. And that's going to be great for the Toronto Raptors. That was the big acquisition they needed to make, the guy they needed to retain. And so for the Raptors, that automatically bodes well as a successful offseason for them. They were able to get back their star guy, person who does everything in the front office. He's been there through everything. Obviously spearheaded the Lowry trade, definitely spearheaded the Kawhi Leonard trade, and also a lot of great trades along the way for Toronto, and is part of the reason why the culture is so good and why the culture is all about winning right now. So re-signing Masai Ujiri, huge for Toronto, huge for the team. Re-signing Ken Burch, that happened today officially. It's great news for Toronto. 3 years, $20 million contract. I think it's a fair deal for Toronto. It's almost a steal considering how good he was playing. I've been talking to some people who are close to him, and yeah, they're super excited to have him come back to Toronto, and he's super happy too. You could just tell his reaction was super wholesome. I put a quote up today about how happy he was, how he wasn't really looking at any other team. And for Toronto, I'm glad that they went with him. Obviously a Montreal native, a guy who really plays well defensively for Toronto. He's versatile. He helped with their rebounding, helped them improve their biggest weakness early in the season, and was part of the reason why they were able to put together a more fluid team overall. And for Toronto, these are two big things that happened recently that really flipped the script for me, and is why I'm giving them a B+ overall. And I was really towing that A line. I was thinking A-, but I ended up setting B+ because I don't want people to be too concerned about it. But I think a B+ is a fair grade. They re-signed Trent Jr. to a team-friendly deal. I think it's about $18 million a year, $54 million for 3 years. So not a bad deal for a guy who's got a lot of potential, super young, obviously does it on both ends of the floor, and is going to be a huge piece for Toronto moving forward. It's the type of contract Toronto wanted. It's a little more short-term, a little cheaper than what Norman Powell got. I think he got like a 4 or 5 year, $90 million contract. He got a big long-term deal that's going to lock up that cap space for a long time. Toronto gets more flexibility. They go younger. It makes a lot of sense for them, and the two-way effect is going to be huge for them this season. That's just one of the other great moves. And then getting assets in return for Kyle Lowry is a big win, right? I've talked about this before. There have been many non-flawless off seasons for Toronto. We've seen the last few years. Feels like nothing happens, and the Raptors just lose players. First, Kawhi Leonard leaves after 2019. 2020, Gasol and Ibaka leave. You're losing guys for no assets, and it makes sense for role guys when that happens, like Ibaka, like Gasol. But when Kawhi Leonard left, maybe there was a sign and trade opportunity that was missed out because the Clippers really wanted to push the tide, and obviously were willing to give away their future for Kawhi Leonard right now, and that's fair. We all know what happened. But for Toronto, they were able to actually sign and trade Lowry because he wanted a bigger contract, and as a result, you're able to get a projected Dragic, Precious Achiuwa, and a second-round pick in return, which is a great return and really adds nice roster depth for a couple pieces deep in the rotation that are going to actually make a significant difference for Toronto to become a team that's younger, that's got the ability to be flexible. I think Dragic really brings that because you could trade him at the deadline and potentially get someone good back in return. So I'm just really excited for what Toronto's got in terms of opportunity, flexibility as well. And just as a team, they've got a lot of options moving forward with the way that the roster is built out, right? And like I said, you get those assets in return. And the Raptors added some roster depth with those later picks in the draft. And I feel like they really rounded out the roster really well. The only real con you could say, and we don't even know if this is a con yet, is that they didn't draft Jalen Suggs, and instead they went for Scotty Barnes. They went a bit riskier the guy that's less proven. And I think this could end up paying really well for Toronto and for them to still have a move to be made as well. We don't know. When they drafted Scotty Barnes, my first impression was Siakam is gone because I feel like they just can't play together when you consider their play styles, in addition to the types of centers that they have, which are more traditional. Burch obviously can stretch it a little bit and has proven that in Toronto, but Precious has never shot in a three in his career. He's their backup center. Boucher's more likely to play a forward type position because he shot 38% from three. Obviously isn't big bodied, so isn't an elite rebounder and can't really guard really big guys in space, especially in the low post area, right, because of the lack of strength. So for Toronto, I think the offseason overall is really good. I talked about the depth, but let's talk about their depth at each position. So we're going to start with just the guard position in general, and we'll talk Van Vliet, Trent Jr., Dragic, Malachi Flynn as the four important pieces. That's a really good guard rotation. When the worst player is Malachi Flynn, a young player with a lot of promise, could be better next season. Trent Jr. could be better next season. And Van Vliet is going to be at least as good as he was last year as long as he stays healthy. Dragic, same thing. Injury concerns, a little older, but I think he'll still be really good. I think he proved he could be a really good player on a really good team. So we'll see what he can do for Toronto, considering they're going to need some offense from him off the bench to create a little bit. And I'm really excited to see his fit if that does fall through and the Raptors do end up acquiring him. At the forward position, you've got OG, Pascal Siakam, Scotty Barnes, Boucher, and then even deeper, you've got Watanabe and Stanley Johnson. This is a really interesting rotation, especially when you look at the top four of OG, Siakam. Those are two really good starters. And then Barnes and Boucher both most likely coming off the bench. That makes an interesting team. I still question whether or not Barnes will start. It kind of depends on what happens with Siakam. If they trade him, I think he probably starts. If they don't, I assume he comes off the bench. The reason why is let's just look at the projected lineup for the Toronto Raptors. And before I do this, obviously this includes, like I said, acquiring Precious, acquiring Dragic, and despite only being 6'8", I can see the Raptors using Precious as a small ball five, as a guy in pick and roll action as a lob threat, and increases their defensive versatility as a guy who can move his feet, sort of like a Bam Light type player. And playing him at the five would not detriment their rebounding and would also improve, like I said, their defensive versatility and just gives them more options, especially because playing him as a forward next to maybe Siakam, Barnes, Burch, these guys in the front court who can't really shoot, doesn't make much sense in a modern NBA offense. So I think that playing Precious, small ball five off the bench, makes a lot more sense than potentially playing him as a four, which he did play most of his minutes as a forward in Miami. Let's look at the projected starting lineup. So the starting lineup for Toronto is Fred VanVleet, Trent Jr., OG, Siakam, and Burch. It's a solid starting lineup. That's not bad at all. I like that this lineup has multiple ball handlers. When you look at Fred VanVleet, Trent Jr., and Siakam, three guys who can create for themselves. OG, similarly, a guy who's working on that part of his game and can definitely bring it when he needs to. Also, really good three-point shooting when you look at those first three guys. Siakam, 50-50. Burch has shown the ability to sort of do it too. So I think it's an interesting lineup that defensively will be hard to score on. And on the other end, I think they've got enough ball handlers to get by. But what really excites me on the bench is Dragic as a player who can come in, run the offense, shoot the ball, and really provides energy as a spark plug for Toronto when their offense is struggling, especially in the half court, which it does a lot. So I like him off the bench with Flynn. Scotty Barnes, I really like him, obviously, with Boucher and Precious. I think the spacing will be enough when you got Dragic, Flynn, two guys who can shoot in the backcourt, and then Boucher, a guy who's proven it as well. I think that Precious and Barnes will be able to play with each other. They're going to have to find a way. They're both young. I think they're both working on their shot as well, especially Barnes is the guy who's the real X factor when you look at this lineup. He's the guy that could potentially become a good shooter, especially because he has decent mechanics, and a guy who, if he does do that, that changes the entire dynamic of the offense. He's a guy who could then play beside Siakam easily, right, if he adds a shot or if Siakam adds a little bit more consistency to his jump shot. But especially with Precious, if long-term the Raptors are trying to keep him, I think that him and Scotty Barnes are going to have to be able to play with each other. And if that's going to happen, Scotty Barnes is going to have to take the leap offensively, especially as a shooter. But yeah, that's everything. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate the support as usual. Like I said, If you want to hear me talk about DeRozan to the Bulls, Sam Decker, Kawhi to the Clippers, Eastern, Western Conference power rankings, all that stuff, check out our podcast, the Raptors Community Podcast. And if you haven't already, give it 5 stars if you are a podcast fan. And also, like this video, throw a comment. I'm interested to hear what you guys give as the Raptors offseason grade. Really throw it down there. I want to hear them all. I'm going to look at them. I'm going to respond potentially if they have some good content in there. But if not, thank you anyways for listening. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll catch you on the next episode. Peace out, everyone.